I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. What I love most about Fairhope is everyone in this room and the majority of Fairhope care deeply about our town and what it has to offer as far as quality of life. We have a rich culture and diverse backgrounds. What we share is a love of our community and city. We live here because it's a choice, and we're extremely blessed. I don't think it came as a surprise when Fairhope was voted the top 5 happiest coastal towns in America by Coastal Living magazine. Let's all remember this when we talk about ways in which we need to protect its character and attributes. We can come together knowing that this is something we all have in common. There are so many cities across the country in greater need than our fair city. Oftentimes, the topics of town hall meetings like this are about bringing jobs for a struggling economy, the need to improve a broken school system, or solutions to make a community safer. All these things are important, but that's not why we're here tonight. We're here today to talk about preserving what we have. And the great news is, it's not too late. Let's all communicate with the grateful heart we are in a happy city with incredible quality of life. Our concern for our community predominantly centers around the growth we are facing because we don't want this growth to change who we are. Fairhope is a desirable place to live, and many people want to be here, and with that comes responsibilities that our city has to address with strategic planning. Growth can be good if managed in a way that complements what we have. When this happens, we all benefit, all citizens, regardless of where you live, our businesses, our schools, our city, our budget. It benefits landowners, developers, homeowners alike. We all benefit. Fairhope has a history. It is rich in culture, heritage, tradition. Lifelong Fairhopians and new residents alike have come to cherish that history and work together to preserve it. Fairhope has a present. Every day we look around us and we are reminded that nothing stands still. Change is inevitable. Change does not have to be bad, but it does need to be guided. It needs to reflect the wishes and needs of our citizens, our businesses, and our city, which serves all stakeholders. Fairhope has a future, a bright one. There is no reason to think that our growth will slow down anytime soon, but growth cannot be allowed to happen haphazardly. Growth must represent our values. It must meet our own growing needs. It must add to the quality of life for which Fairhope is known and is the reason all of this growth is happening. To come to share in what is so special about Fairhope is to share in the responsibility of protecting it. We must start now to plan for our future. No longer can we turn a blind eye to aging infrastructure and outdated solutions. We need new and innovative thinking. We need to engage our citizens and our local businesses. Economic development is community development. Planning must develop the guidelines for what we want and how planned growth fits our vision. Fairhope Public Utilities is one of our greatest assets. We don't like to think about it much until something happens and it's out momentarily. Yet these very services bear the greatest burden of our growth. Without a vision and a plan for expanding these services to serve what we have now and to serve our growing areas with new technology, Fairhope will falter. To move forward successfully, to bring a vision to reality, you must have leadership, a leadership that shares the common vision and is willing to work with all stakeholders in bringing that vision to a reality. Many of you have met and have had the opportunity to work with some of our key leaders, implementing a plan for our vision. They bring a wealth of knowledge and skill in their independent fields. Sherry Lou Bloodworth Botop is leading us in economic and community development. Wayne Dias is our Director of Planning. Richard Peterson, our Operation Director. They have been working collaboratively to help create a plan for Fairhope's problems today. They will lead our discussion tonight on future Fairhope, moving forward together.
So clearly I drew the short straw. I get to go first. So I usually just speak, but I wrote some things down because I wanted to be sure to touch on some things that I've heard. Mainly, the question I hear most often is, what do you do for the city? Why are you there? And so I want to talk a little bit about economic and community development in my role. So, and I hope this is not meant to patronize anyone. This is just, I want to get into a little bit of modern day economic development in the way that I see it and we see it in Fairhope. It's not just about industrial development, and especially in a smaller city like Fairhope, it's about seeking opportunities to enhance the assets that we already have. That doesn't mean only recruiting big businesses or large industrial sites, although that can be part of it, but it also includes creating pipelines where local and regional educational programs provide skills that employers demand. It also means staying closely tied to our city planning process so that when developers are looking for investments, we can provide information about the things our city wants and needs, while also evaluating what will increase our revenue base. Identifying incentives for this type of development is also a part of the role of economic development. So community development. It's an integral part of economic development, and it's inextricably, I knew I'd tongue-tie that, tied when it comes to small towns. Community development is centered on engagement, listening to feedback, convening stakeholders, and providing information about our city to all of you, the community. These are all external functions of my role, but internal functions are equally important, and they include consistently identifying ways to connect citywide efforts so they are coordinated both fiscally and practically. At the core of my internal function is design and process thinking, also referred to as city resilience strategic process, which is essentially a way to evaluate the big picture while simultaneously moving the smaller pieces forward with the goal of preserving and protecting our assets and what makes Fairhope unique. Seeking ways to fund projects and needs outside of our tax base is also a big part of my role. Recent examples include obtaining grants to design wayfinding signage for our downtown area, create a plan for traffic calming and pedestrian safety, grant to upgrade the parking deck area. I'm sure you're happy to hear that, I am. Build a hub for brats, fund a pilot for electric shuttle service to help alleviate some traffic downtown. Funding for completing our complete streets, including multimodal bike and pedestrian trails. Another example is a recently acquired NOAA grant for the Gulf of Mexico Alliance Resilience Grant, which will be used to design a pilot project for stormwater management in our most temperamental watershed in Tatumville. This is also the community where we have a community engagement process underway in South Fairhope. And as well as other infrastructure opportunities. So in my 7 months at the city, approximately $500,000 in grants have been identified and secured, and we've just started. I definitely have just started. In addition to this, pro bono expertise has been leveraged to gather input to help us answer our most pressing questions. All of these things are connected. Beyond this, my role works with local business associations as well as our Chamber of Commerce, but also stays tied to regional efforts through Coastal Alabama Partnership, or CAP, because what impacts Fairhope does not stop at our city limits. I stay connected to our large stakeholders and partners, which includes Thomas Hospital, Mobile Infirmary, Continental Motors, and local business owners. Also in this department are parks, recreation, city rentals, and events. Paige Crawford is our special events coordinator. Did she leave? She was here. Oh, there she is. Hi, Paige. As well as Tom Cool, who's on a well-deserved vacation now, who manages our fields, recreation, baseball, soccer, rec center, pool, and tennis are part of his area. The Nick Center, Museum, and Civic Center are also part of this department. And finally, my role works with the mayor and council and leadership staff to evaluate our city assets, like the marina and golf course, to ensure we're optimizing these assets for you without disrupting quality of life. That's something we hear a lot. And you may have heard Lynn Mazer and others speak about this during council work sessions, and I think these are great examples. So if I can go back to community engagement for a minute, I'd like to share something that we launched as a trial prior to this meeting. I think you would agree that social media has become a place where people are not always their best selves. Often comments are made on Facebook or on blogs that are unproductive and sometimes downright cruel. This led me to seek new ways to engage citizens beyond face-to-face conversations, which is my first preference, but there's only so much time in a day. An article came to my attention in MIT Magazine about a tech company who developed a platform to encourage meaningful civic participation. I reached out to the founder of this platform, who agreed to allow us to test it here in Fairhope at no charge. We launched this online tool and named it One Fairhope Forum, and the topic of responsible growth was chosen. Did any of you here participate in that by any chance? Oh, good. Awesome. Let me describe briefly how it was set up. So there were 12 seated comments to help generate a conversation. These comments were curated with help from the experts who created the platform, who have, by the way, no stake in any outcome in Fairhope whatsoever. Their commitment is to ensuring that citizens have a voice in public processes and decision-making. And actually, this is the first time they've done this in the US. They've done it all over the world. Examples of the 12 opening comments included, population growth is putting a strain on our city-provided services, or the growth in Fairhope is a reflection of the city and demonstrates that Fairhope is a great place to live and call home. So those are two examples. Additional comments were made by those who participated in the survey. They were reviewed by the people who created the platform, and comments that were relevant to the topic were added to the survey. So the final result was that 63 comments on which people could weigh in were added. Let me tell you why I'm excited about that. 6,224 positions on statements were submitted. That is a lot. It was open July 27th until noon today. This was shared on Facebook and on our website and via email. This kind of participation is extremely exciting, especially to the founders of the platform. It shows that civic engagement is important here. And what we learned, I'll share with you now. Just briefly, there'll be a study that will be posted on our website and on social media as well that you can read. But we learned that people feel a lot of different ways about responsible growth, and we knew that going in. But the question we wanted to answer was, what are the specific issues, and how do different stakeholder groups feel about these things? Recurring themes included concern about school overcrowding, increases in traffic, zoning outside of our city limits, strain on infrastructure, mainly stormwater, and inevitability versus control. So what is inevitable versus what the city can control. So those were recurring themes. So, and again, that will be posted on our website in more detail, but I wanted to share that with you because I just got a snapshot of that overview. So I think for me, that's it. And I'll turn it over to Wayne Dias. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley Lee. Again, I'm Wayne Dice. I'm the planning director. And first, I just want to say it's been a pleasure to work for the city of Fairhope for the past 6 months. Shirley Lee and Richard have been great to work with. As it was mentioned earlier, our work is really more of a collaborative process because planning crosses various lines. It's not just about zoning. It's about emergency management, utilities, economic development. So I'm very, very proud to be up here with these two people who have been, I think, dedicated servants to the city. I'm glad to be here. As most of you know, planning is always very controversial. That's something that they didn't tell me that when I was in college studying planning, but I found out fairly quickly that it's very controversial. One of the goals that we try to have is to remove as much of that as we can. And that is done by a predictable and consistent process. So what we've been working on is trying to make a process that is predictable for everybody involved, the developers, the public. Everybody has some understanding about what will happen and what the likely result will be. Obviously, you always can't do that. But also applying that consistently from person to person, from developer to developer, and being as efficient as we can, because time is money for some people, and we respect that. Property rights is a very, very serious issue. It's people's income, it's their property, it's their family's property, so we take that very seriously in the department. The planning department is a small department, but we have some very, very dedicated and very talented staff in the planning department who are very dedicated to their job, and they have done a fine job, which I'm very proud of for them. Going forward, the question is, how do you create a predictable process? And I believe that starts with regulations that are consistent. The zoning ordinance, the subregs, any other ordinances that we apply, they have to be consistent with one another. So they have to be well written and addressing the issues that need to be addressed with facts and many times science-based regulations like for buffers and setbacks. So that's the first step. Also, one of the big things that I hope to pursue is really refining our comprehensive plan to make that a much broader, more inclusive document. Typically, you have, in a comprehensive plan, you have elements or chapters to that comprehensive plan. And one of those, for example, is future land use. Future land use will lay out what intensity and density of uses you'll have. For example, you may have low-density development in a comprehensive plan, and you know that if you're the public or a neighbor or a developer, you know that if that land use district is low density, you know that typically a rezoning to a low density district would be would be supported and be easy. Now those districts are set up based on features of the land. When you start doing a comprehensive plan and you start assigning future land use districts, you have to review all the aspects of property that would lend itself or make it an encumbrance to developing. For example, wetlands, topography, utilities, water and sewer connections. Obviously, those are all big drivers of what intensity should a land be developed to, as well as compatibility with neighboring properties. And so as we move forward, I'm hoping that we can put together a revised comprehensive plan that does just that does try to give some predictability to the process. So when you pick up that document, you know what you're going to be judged against as the public. You know what the developer will be held to. And I've been places that have done this, and it makes it a smoother process. It's never controversy-free, but it does help. And you are trying to achieve a long-range vision or a long-range goal. All that is designed to help guide the development process, so in 20 years or 15 years, you are realizing a certain development pattern that was decided upon when that plan was adopted or when that plan was created. So to me, that's very exciting because you do get to work with multiple entities in the government. The public, community design is a part of that, which has a lot of public input. And so from my perspective, that is probably the single most important issue moving forward in my mind for the city of Fairhope in the future. I think right now we could expand upon the current comprehensive plan again and really realize some of the visions and the goals that we have in Fairhope and really sort of, I think, fulfill the destiny that was created early on by like the single tax colony and the early founders of Fairhope. They had a certain vision. That vision was carried out by their plans and their actions, and so my goal is to try to put together a comprehensive plan to do just that. I think it would be a huge benefit. It protects property values. It enhances certain properties. So that's one of my main goals. When we talk about smart growth or controlled growth or managed growth, it's not about stopping growth. It's making sure that when growth occurs, it is done the right way in the right locations at the right intensity and density. If you do that, I think it can be a win-win for everybody. I mean, obviously, change is difficult for some, but I think you have to realize that growth will occur. It's going to occur, and I think it's our job to do our dead level best to make sure that we can manage that in the best way we can and carry out the vision that the city develops and the city adopts. As staff members, that's the easy part for us. Once we have those plans in place, evaluating those plans fairly, predictably, consistently, I think when you do that, the end result is a very, very good planning process. I've been to a lot of places that have very good plans, and the process it's good, it's predictable, the public is engaged in that, the developers understand and know what they're going to be held to, and for the most part, there are very little issues when that happens. So I'm excited about that. I look forward to that. I look forward to that collaborative process, and as we move forward, that's my main goal I'd like to achieve. And so again, it is a collaborative process. It'll involve people in this room. It'll involve various utilities and private sector people and departments, but I do think it's a worthwhile goal, and that's really what I think can really turn the corner for Fairhope and really enhance what we have here. It's a beautiful place. We want to enhance it, not be a detriment to that. I really feel like that a full-fledged, all-inclusive comprehensive plan can do just that, and I'm excited about it, and that's what I hope to achieve. And with that, I'll turn it over to Richard.
Thank you, Wayne. You make it sound so easy. Thank y'all for being here. It's a great pleasure and honor to serve y'all as operations director, and I appreciate that opportunity. I thank the mayor and the council for giving me that opportunity. I've learned to appreciate the professional staff we have with the utilities and with public works. They're extremely accommodating to me, and they work very hard to serve your interest. And yeah, they deserve more applause than anything. You're right, thank you. I know the mayor had talked about goals, and you know, it's kind of hard to define goals sometimes when you're new to a system, and certainly I'm new to the Fairhope utility system, but and I would break it down into some short-term and some longer-term goals that I would have from the utility perspective and public works. And certainly we're working on through this moratorium and looking at capacity issues that we have. Wastewater would probably be the most critical infrastructure we have that we think capacity issue-wise we need to make sure that we're managing the growth in a way that supports the infrastructure we have to get it from where it's collected to the wastewater plant, and we're working on that. The electric side of the operation, we're looking at trying to upgrade some substations with capacity and newer equipment. And with the gas system, we certainly have some cast iron gas mains that we need to start to look at replacing. And then the water, we have the elevated tank that we need to have painted. And I'm working on that very diligently. It's I'm one that likes to look at all the issues and kind of be extremely comfortable with what we're doing when we're talking about spending $1 million in this case. I just want to make sure that we look at all the options we have available, especially for the antennas that go on top of it, and we don't want to come back next year and add antennas and create problems with the tank we just painted, so we're trying to work through those issues. But those are some of the short-term goals. I think facility-wise, you know, we could do a little bit better there. We've got some issues with expanding our technology. We just went through a system of changing the billing process, and we appreciate everybody's patience with that. And I'm I've been told more than once that I'm not somebody who can write code, and I'm actually proud to say that I do not write code. But when you try to do that, and when you try to take data from one platform to another and get that other platform to understand where all those numbers go and how it's presented, it can be difficult. So it was a challenge for that last month in the bill, but now we're on the right track, and we're going to be able to start using that software to look at customer usages and things that you know, may help us down the road treat everybody fairly when we look at what rates are doing and where they might need to go. The other technology that we need to look at, obviously, are our SCADA system, where we monitor all of our equipment and we know what equipment is working well, and then we can determine what equipment needs to have some maintenance performed on it to get it back up to the standard that it needs to be working at. The mapping system is part of that in a sense that when you put your infrastructure on that mapping database, you can start using it for asset management, and you can start documenting and keeping track of issues you have with specific parts of your infrastructure, and then you might look at where that may need to be upgraded or changed out or replaced. So those are the kind of things that we need to work toward on a short-term goal. In the long-term sense of things, and you look where do we want to be 15, 20 years from now, and my initial goal would be to want to protect what I believe is the most important asset we have in Fairhope, and that is the waterfront, the bayfront. We're extremely blessed, and I don't know that many of us would be here if that wasn't part of the culture and the draw that we have here. We completed a beach renourishment plan, and that was done maybe last year. I've had an opportunity to look at a little bit of that. When you start looking at trying to protect the erosion issues and create beach settings where you can minimize erosion along the beachfront and protect yourself from storm events, I think that should be one of our most important goals. When you look at the boat ramp on Pier Street, you know, if anybody's ever tried to pull a boat in on a west wind, I don't know if anybody's done that or not, but it can be very challenging, and somehow we need to find a way to make that an easier process, and then maybe add other accesses in other places, maybe for paddle boards and kayaks and things that make it a little bit easier to get in and out of the water. It wouldn't be proper to try to focus that much attention on the beachfront and not recognize that stormwater that drains through Fairhope and enters the bay can have adverse effects to water quality as well. We can look at instantaneous events that are extreme and cause severe erosion in places, and we can look at ways to perhaps mitigate some of that peak flow in terms of the LID techniques that we do have documented in our planning and zoning documents now. And of course, part of stormwater is being able to manage the detention ponds that are required, and just the infrastructure for the drainage system in downtown. It's difficult to comprehend the condition of it because it's not mapped, and we haven't seen the insides of most of these culverts in years, and what we wind up doing is reacting to problems that occur after rain events, and sometimes that's a sinkhole, sometimes that may be a road washed in, sometimes it's just the pipe failed, and part of being able to find the most critical parts of the infrastructure is being able to assess that with the expertise in-house. And one thing I would like to do, is try to develop some expertise in-house to start developing a process for assessing the infrastructure. I think that's going to be important. And part of stormwater management too, I think, if you look at how far down the road you want to carry this, and I think we should look far enough ahead to make decisions now that give us an opportunity to get there. Would be to look at maybe we should have it as a utility. Maybe we should have a stormwater utility service that does the maintenance of the detention ponds and the features within the stormwater system that tend to fail periodically. So I think in the back of our minds we need to be aware of that, and I think we need to have a discussion about a stormwater utility. I read in the paper the other day that global change and climate change, the warmer the weather continues to get, the more rain we should expect. And we have problems now, and you know, it doesn't sound like they may be getting any better. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to try to plan ahead for that. The other issue with the bay is we have a wastewater plant that discharges in the bay. And we've talked about water quality with swim advisories, and I made the comment at one of the council meetings that, you know, we should be looking at water quality from each of the specific drainage areas that drain into the bay from Fairhope, where our wastewater system is, because we don't recognize any overflows from the wastewater at this point in time, but we can't say without complete knowledge that we don't have overflows. So what I would like to do and continue to do is take samples of some of the watersheds. The Big Mouth Gully is one. If I mispronounce these gullies, I apologize. Tatumville is another one. And just to give you a scope of reference, with the last 3-inch rain event, we had samples from Tatumville and Big Mouth, just upstream of the wastewater plant at Big Mouth, and just at the concrete channel of the Magnolia Beach condominiums. And if you're going to issue a swim advisory, you're going to find bacteria counts that are at or above 104 organisms per 100 milliliter. In those samples, we found upwards of 11,000, 12,000 organisms per 100 milliliters. We're looking to find a way to identify where that source of that level of bacteria comes from. We've got techniques when we evaluate the wastewater system to look for places of inflow. And if you consider inflow an opportunity for water to get in the pipe, then you have to consider those same opportunities for the water to get out of the pipe. And we just need to be certain as we look at trying to manage and rehabilitate some of the sewer system that we're doing it in the places that need it first. We do those first, and that's just how we need to start working to manage the wastewater system. So when you look at all that wastewater infrastructure in the bay and you look at where most of the growth is on 181, you start to wonder, well, is the right thing to do to take the transmission requirements to funnel everything from 181 and that corridor all the way into and through Fairhope to get to the wastewater plant on the bay? Or is the right thing to do to find a site suitable for a secondary or satellite plant to offset some of the transmission needs through town and start looking at ways to dispose of wastewater effluents that are not direct discharges into creeks or bays? And one of those options that's become almost second nature in Florida is to utilize that wastewater effluent as irrigation water. And one of the opportunities I think we have is to look at the Quail Creek Golf Course as an opportunity to have an instant demand, if you will, for irrigation need. And we have an irrigation system in the golf course that we can serve residential properties on either side of it. And I think that's an opportunity we need to start looking at. And you can't snap your fingers and that happened today. It takes a lot of documentation and it takes a lot of data collecting in order to understand what the demand is, in order to understand what the storage components of that demand is, because you don't do it continuously, you do it when it doesn't rain for a while, and then sometimes you don't do it at all if it's raining. So you have to understand how to design that system to fit and get the most out of your production. And then you have to have the backup plan to discharge into what would be Cowpen Creek in that case, and make sure that those flow parameters for Cowpen Creek are where they need to be able to discharge whatever excess effluent that you would have at that time. So, yeah, and those are the kind of things I think give us an opportunity to explore options. I think those are the things that give us an opportunity to be proactive in how we want to treat the bay that we all have a great concern for. And if we don't do it, you know, I don't know that anybody's going to do it for us. And I don't know that we're going to be able to tell anybody that would be our neighbors anywhere on Mobile Bay or anywhere else in the southeast region of the country that maybe they ought to look at doing some of these things if they're not already. I think it would be a good example, and I think it would set a tone for leadership that I think the citizens here and the professionals we have available to us here can make happen. But anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Another blessing we have is not that we have a lot of citizens that care deeply about our community, but we also have an unbelievable amount of city employees who care deeply about the future of Fairhope and making sure that we do it right. I think you can understand that the future is now. Now is the time we lay the plans to be implemented through the time to meet the needs of our growth, to preserve our lifestyle and heritage. Our city government is responsible for governing all the people of Fairhope, and a lot of this is planning now and planning for our future. The planning process for new development will be efficient and citizen engaged. Neighborhood charrette formatted meetings will be utilized to hone in on vision. I have put in a proposal for this very type of comprehensive planning in the Restore Act funds because it is this type of inclusive planning needed for Fairhope's future to blossom in a way that benefits us all. America is a country of people with different opinions on how to approach any given situation. That's good. Fairhope is a microcosm of the country we live in, and we eagerly share those differing opinions. And when we share them with respect for each other, they meld together and take root to form solutions we can all live with. We want to partner with all to make it happen. We want to respectfully and successfully share opinions to reach the solutions that will work for a future we all desire. Our original founders arrived here with a vision and a plan. We are not reinventing that vision, but we are taking time to refocus a plan, which includes everyone as it did back in 1894. We look forward to working together with you to preserve Fairhope's future, to move forward together. This is Leslie, and she's going to go around and hand you the microphone. If you have a question, we can answer.
Right side.
TJ. Leslie needs tennis shoes.
That's it. Where'd Karen go to?
It's down here.
Karen?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. This question actually is, I guess, directed toward Wayne and Karen a little bit. I do really support your efforts on, maintaining some smart growth. There's a comment, actually there's a heading in the brochure that really caught my attention, and it said we are at a crossroads. And I think most people could argue that we're about 15 years past that crossroads, because most of the development that has most outraged the community has happened during that period of time. So we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on getting this together, which I think you acknowledge. Wayne, could you talk, first of all, specifically about, have you actually put together a map of how you plan to tweak the comprehensive plan? What's the budget behind that? Are we getting outside consultants involved in it? Do you have a steering committee? Do you have subcommittees? How exactly we're going to get the community involvement? And I say that because a little people are skeptical about this process, because this isn't the first time we've had this type of engagement. It led to the current comprehensive plan. So I guess the other question I would have is, what's going to make this process different from the processes in the past? And then finally, I heard you talk about tweaking the comprehensive plan. Is it safe to say that the city now is abandoning the village concept that's currently in the comprehensive plan? Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me say that as far as the past practices, I wasn't here, so I can't speak to those. I'm not sure what process they went through with that. The current comprehensive plan is still in effect. We still use that. As a matter of fact, on the Planning Commission agenda on Monday night, we use it in our staff report. So that is still in effect. We still utilize it. It's a duly adopted ordinance or a plan that we will follow, and the state law requires us to have one, and we are following it. As far as a new process for a comprehensive plan, I would anticipate, now again, this is all, as the mayor mentioned, we are seeking funds for this, because this is not a cheap process. It's not an extremely expensive process, but it's not cheap. I would anticipate we hiring a firm who specializes in comprehensive planning. I've done this before in other places that I've worked, where we had a firm come in, third-party firm. You know, most of the time they're not even anywhere remotely close to us. They do take feedback from the public. They do consider all the things we've talked about tonight as far as topography and so forth. It's a citizen-driven process. It's a lot of public input goes into that. As the mayor mentioned, there are charrettes and those kind of things that help determine how certain parts of Fairhope would look. But to answer your question, I think going forward, we anticipated a planning firm to come in, a third-party independent analysis that they would give us. As we all know, when you live and work in a place, you do form opinions about things that's sometimes hard to change, and I think it's very refreshing to bring a company in of professionals and other people to give a fresh analysis of it. And many times these firms do business around the country and other parts of the world, actually, and can give us some fresh ideas that we may not have considered. So it's very important. Again, it'll be citizen-driven. I would, you know, when you do these kind of things, you typically do an RFQ or an RFP, and you kind of outline what you want to be considered in that plan. And as we mentioned earlier tonight, there are certain chapters or elements you want to look at. I would anticipate a future land use element that sort of predicts or describes where areas will grow and in what intensity. I would anticipate there would be a community design element, which would be more about what kind of development, how it would look, how it would feel, what would be the street layouts, those kind of things. Downtown areas, that would be a community design element of a comprehensive plan. Intergovernmental coordination is also a big element. As we know, when you have projects going forward, it's just not us looking at it. It's the state, it's the federal government, it's the county government in some cases. And so you need to have that process described and well thought out. It should include most likely schools and those kind of things, because those have a large impact on development. Even natural resources and open space and those kind of things, that is probably one of the most important assets we have, as Richard spoke about earlier with the Bay. I mean, we need to protect that asset. That is a very marketable product that if we don't do it right, we can ruin it, and we can basically destroy what brings a lot of people here. So that's a very, very big part of it. And that is, you know, coastal. How do we manage the coastal areas? How we manage the creeks and rivers and streams? Appropriate buffers. Also, I would anticipate having a recreational element that would discuss sidewalks and multi-purpose paths and where they should go and what they should connect to. And then also, one of the most important elements I would envision would be an implementation plan, because you can have all the plans in the world, but if you don't use those and implement those, they're of no value to you. And an implementation chapter or element of the plan would dictate and lay out how that plan should be used, when it should be used, how it should be implemented, how it should be reviewed. I think that's what I would envision. Also, it's important that when you do have a long-range plan, this I would anticipate a 20-year plan is what I would anticipate, there should be evaluations of that plan every 4 to 5 years and evaluate how, are we following it? If we are, how are we doing that? What areas can we improve on? Because I think once you adopt it, it needs to be updated. It needs to be a living, kind of breathing document that you update and reflect changed conditions from maybe your jurisdiction, but maybe even you might have a large development from another jurisdiction that may impact the city of Fairhope. So that's kind of what I envision. Now, as far as the charrettes and steering committees, that's something that would have to be discussed at a later time. I think what we don't want to do is get bogged down in those things. I've seen plans that have great intentions, but when you have a very, very bureaucratic process to go through, sometimes things get lost and it just loses steam and ultimately is not successful. But we certainly would want to have a community engagement, but probably want to have an efficient process so this can be done in a very efficient and I want to say a quick process, because we want to make sure it's a thorough, good, quality document, but we want to do this sooner rather than later. So I hope that answers your question.
And the comprehensive plan, and when we say community engaged, it will be using communications in all different types of ways. In the 21st century way, we will have town hall meetings, I think, for some, but it really will be getting out into the different areas in and outside the city to talk about what they would like to see this area to look like. There are landowners that do have a plan. It's not something they might want to, keep it in their family, and that's what they want to do. But it's good to get that conversation started now. And we can pre-zone certain areas as well, which makes it easier for them to come inside the city. And we want to make that process very easy and beneficial. A plan like this is about $650,000, and that's the amount that I requested for Restore Act funds. I feel like out of the millions and millions that I think we will get over the years from these funds, that is number one. That's really where we need to get this done. We want something to be very proud of. And what he said, with the process being consistent, it can't be consistent if you don't have something that is a plan that can be enforced. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing, using everybody's knowledge and experience to have that. And hopefully that gift from the Restore Act funds will be something that we will be able to enjoy, many generations in the future.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Up front.
Heard today, I hope you can hear me, I just heard today that by 2030, Fairhope to Mobile, large parts of Baldwin County will be as big and as closely populated as someplace like Houston, Texas, or New York City. And I think what you all are doing is wonderful, because if this kind of growth is coming and all the charts say that it is, it's got to be planned right and done right, or we're going to be left behind. No question. And we've got the best city in Baldwin County, so we want to preserve it while we're getting to be the megalopolis that we're going to be. So I just want to commend you all for the job you're doing.
Thank you, Nancy. When we think about OWA, it's only, somebody just told me, I think it's 11 miles away. We have to think about the growth that's happening. I don't think it's really that far out. Those are the things we have to plan for, because those will affect us very, very quickly.
If I could add also, you know, planning brings value, and it brings value to your properties. It brings value to all properties. I've been a lot of places, and some of the places that has the most intense regulation, sometimes it's a bear to go through, but their property values are extremely, extremely high. And so I do think that a well-planned city, when we're addressing the appropriate items, does add a tremendous value, not just in quality of life, which is very important, but also in the value of your property, the value of your investments. And I think that's one of the biggest assets that I see planning can have is quality of life and protecting your assets in your property.
There's somebody in the back too.
Hello. Yogi Berra once said that predictions are very difficult, especially about the future. And when I came to Fairhope 40 years ago, 7,000 people lived here. We're now getting into nearly 20,000 people. I don't know if we've crossed that threshold, but we're close. We're scheduled to grow 65% within the next 20 years. All of Baldwin County is scheduled to do that, and we're the fastest growing city in Baldwin County. What's burdened Fairhope for the last 30 years is it isn't what you're asking for, it's who's asking for it. And we haven't maintained or upgraded the standards that are necessary for us to be able to move forward and protect our quality of life and our investments. We're increasingly putting massive amounts of water into watersheds that are finite. We almost lost Section Street about 12 years ago because of a massive rain event. We've had an awful lot of erosion problems, and we're not making that any better. We need to up the standards on what events we're going to be able to have to handle for those watersheds. We have to go to retention ponds and detention ponds that are going to match those new watershed standards because they're finite and they're not going to get any larger. So we have a lot of problems. We have economic growth that we certainly have to deal with. We are not going to generate the sales tax revenue that Daphne or Foley have because of the way their sales tax situation is set up. We have to work with our utilities profits, and our utilities profits have not been consistently put back into infrastructure, and that has to be concentrated on. So what Karen's trying to do and what these people are trying to do is to protect what all of us care about Fairhope, and so it can grow and maintain that quality of life that we've all come to love. Otherwise, we're going to start seeing it erode, and we're just going to waste out, and I don't want to see that. And thank you so much for your efforts in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Leslie?
I want to say
Dan,
something.
one of the,
let him.
Yeah, there's several techniques with the LID pictures that you can do in site-specific, and then there's also opportunities to do regional type detention and facilities like that that all buffer, you know, that peak runoff event from happening in any location. But that's the value of having a stormwater utility. If there is a regional detention built, then they can sell credits from that with development that's upstream of it. And you know, as long as you do it to where it's fair, and as long as you can do it to where you're making a difference, I think there's value in that. But it takes, you know, a concerted effort to make sure that those goals are reached as you get into this thing, because it can go south pretty quick if you're not careful. The last thing we want to do is put the wrong foot forward first. We want to make sure that we do the right things and plan and be appropriate with how we measure success too. Anyway.
Yes, I was sitting here listening, and one of the things I was very impressed with about being inclusive in the outlying areas of Fairhope, because one of the things I found out that if you omit the outer limits of any city, then you're going to have a catastrophe, because those that are without are going to start doing something stupid. And we have had great success with peace in this area. We hadn't had any type of gun violence and what have you. And I feel that along with the city planning and the future of what has been put forth, and if we bring in the outlying areas in Fairhope and bring them into the city limits, then we can have control. The infrastructure can be taken care of, drainage and all that stuff that's creating problems in the outlying area. And I was very impressed with what was said, and if we look forward to that, we can have a great city, which will be inclusive, all people, all humanity. And I'm looking forward to that, Mayor.
Thank you.
Just have one question. My family's been here, or moved here in 1955. How are we going to pay for this? I agree with everything that everybody said. We got excellent people in Fairhope employees, and the mayor and the council. They work together, but I still would like to know how we're going to pay for it.
That's a great question. Well, we're going to have to take it one priority at a time is all I know to do. And you know, today I think interest is fairly low. And I think today may be an opportunity to bite off some of the short-term needs we have. And then as growth occurs, you should be able to supplement the money available to not only pay down that debt, but also look at the next opportunity in terms of an infrastructure project. I don't know the answer to that question. We're still looking at, with this new billing system, we're looking at making sure that every meter reads accurately. And, you know, we want to make sure we're getting all the revenue that we deserve now before we start looking at how much more we need. We need to look at charging more for people to get on the system. Forget about the rate. We're still putting money in the wastewater plant. We're putting money in wells and tanks, and those things are capacity issues that people should pay for when they hook up. And so we need to look at how we do that too. But, you know, and that way the people that come in pay their fair share going forward, and then we can balance the fairness with the rate after that if there's a need to do that.
Also,
I know I didn't answer your question.
we need to look at, as property values go, we have about half of the population that live inside the city limits, and it's pretty spotty. As we incentivize coming in, because we need to make it easy, and we also need to have a clear set of benefits for people who live inside the city, because they're paying for a lion's share of our infrastructure and, you know, all of the income that it needs to have to run the city. Our utilities subsidizes a great deal, more than I even reported in April. Last year, the city was running at a $4.2 million deficit. We do get transfers from utilities, but those are not and have not been disclosed in a transparent way. It showed that the city's doing well, and over here the utilities had a little bit of a profit. We're not going to report like that anymore. The city is running at a deficit. The only way you can fix it is by looking at ways the city can be sustainable on its own. That's the goal. Doesn't mean that we're not going to have money from our utilities, but we have to separate it, analyze every line item to see what can we do to fix that. And we need more participation. If half of the citizens live outside the city and most of the money is being paid by the people who live inside, then it's something we have to do, not only to be financially sustainable, but we have to have it, most importantly, so we can control the way we grow. And everybody will benefit. You know, that's the thing. It's no longer, I don't want to go in because maybe, you know, I don't want to pay a little bit more property taxes for the city. It's more about, or I care about what I want to do with my property. It's more important now, I think, people want to know what their neighbor's going to do with their property. And the amount of money that you're going to spend in the additional city property taxes, once you build that list of benefits to come inside the city, if you live outside the city, you're going to pay for it indirectly because it has never been structured in a way that everybody pays into the services that they're getting. So that's one of the big ways we're going to get money, and by bringing people in, our property tax income will increase. It's only been 4 years that our sales tax has superseded our property taxes in income. And our sales tax is going up all the time, and most of that sales tax is being spent outside of our city. We have a great deal of tourism, and we don't spend a dime on it. The tourism we want, we already have. What we need when tourists come is we need to capitalize on that while they're here. We need more accommodations. If people are staying in Gulf Shores and Daphne and surrounding areas, we're losing out on that lodging tax. We lose out usually in where they're going to eat, excuse me. So there's things that we can put in and start to do right now that just capitalizes on what we already have. We already have tourism, you know. So there's a lot of ways that we can increase our income, looking at all of our rates for services. Oftentimes when I'm meeting with a department head, I ask them, when's the last time you looked at it? And they're like, how long have I been with the city? And that's the answer, you know. So I'm saying there's a lot that we can do, and we are doing to increase that. So.
Good evening to the mayor and everyone, and the panel also. My question is that a few months ago in a council meeting, I mentioned about our substations, electrical substations. I'm very aware that they can become very dangerous. They already automatically give off a certain amount of radiation. And if they go offline too much, how much would that affect those that live close by?
I'm thinking I understood your question about the substation capacity and people going offline. And in terms of solar energy or in terms of wind, is that? Right.
As the heat progresses, then that each one of these transformers have been made to only take so much of element heat.
That's correct.
So my concern is that I know if anything, if it goes to a boom, it may take 6 months to a year longer to get something like that back.
That's great. And we just recently modeled our electric system. And we modeled every substation, forgive me for saying this, going kaboom. And we have a plan to pick up all of that load through balancing the rest of those circuits with the other substations that are still active. And we went out and we purchased a little bit of extra capacity for the substation at Belanta, used transformers, and we hope to have those hooked up, I don't know, maybe within the month. But that's going to give us the time to do the upgrades on the Nichols and the Fairhope Avenue substation before we have to get to that substation. But that's part of the upgrade, is creating the excess capacity so that as we do develop load, and temperatures may soar over, you know, certain, you know, I don't know what the long-term weather forecast is, and it's hard to predict all that, but you know, we're preparing for extra capacity when we do this.
Since you brought it up, utilizing other alternate energy sources such as solar. I mean, Elon Musk and have already got solar panels with like roofing. They've got wall batteries.
Yeah.
5 wall batteries in a facility in Chainwell and Save. So if you look at upgrades in the future, you may
We're actually looking at being part of a solar pilot project in Fairhope, which you'll hear more about later.
And our AMEA, where we get our electric, they're supplying funds for that. We pay, and a percentage of that comes back in the form of grants. So we're going to utilize that.
We won't have to touch that money for it. They're going to pay for it beyond that money, which is even better.
We do have to advocate state for better incentives, though, because it's just, that's why it's not so popular in Alabama in general, and you don't see that many companies offering it and installing, because you need, I think, government help to make it affordable. And I'm not sure, but Alabama's not quite there yet.
Well, we do have the demonstration project that we're going to support. And, you know, in terms of the capacity for that type of station, you may be looking at a small business that it would serve. And so, and that's when the sun's shining bright. You know, one of the issues with solar or wind is that some of the peak load times during the dead of winter, for instance, if it's all, you know, electric heat, typically speaking, there's not a whole lot of sunshine at that moment. And so you still have to have all that capacity within the grid to serve that load. And that's what makes it kind of defeats the purpose of utilizing that kind of energy, because you still have to have everything within the grid to pick it up when it's not able to serve you.
What I was getting at is smart grid models work, pressurized.
Yeah, and now there's no doubt.
Like a water pressure system. That's essentially, there's pressure to keep it up. But when you start stepping the integrated systems, you go to low energy lighting, LEDs.
Right.
There's so many other more efficient infrastructure.
That's right.
Assets that can be integrated, even to old legacy structures, to make it work in a more balanced system. I'm simply saying that if we're going to invest money, invest in those directions and look at the cooperation you need to bring those technologies, if you will,
Right.
those services into the community. That adds a lot to it. And you start looking at things like communication technologies, broadband, signal systems, and all that. That stuff gets all integrated into the networks.
Right. And I agree with that. We're going to start with the solar array that we're going to put out, and we're going to look at how that is utilized within the system.
Just imagine if you had 10% of the rooftops that were generating more utility value than that structure, even if it's a commercial structure.
Right.
What are you going to do with that extra capacity? Just a question.
I agree. Thank you. I don't think I've got an answer, but starting with the solar array that AMEA is going to provide in Fairhope will give us at least some background data to start looking at. I think the other part of the solar issue is the technology for batteries now is getting better and better. And so when you start looking at being able to store electric energy, you know, batteries will play a large role in that. And so we'll have to look at how that technology assists the solar capability for what would be green energy. I mean, I'd be looking at having a wind farm out, you know, half a mile off the beachfront. That would be pretty cool too, but those things aren't cheap either.
Sure question. I have a question. My daughter last year did a presentation in school for all the waste, like recycling. I moved to Fairhope 3 years ago, and I love Fairhope. I think it's a great city, but I did notice that not many people is very conscious about recycling. And all through this program that my daughter and another other friend did, we found out that half of the stuff that is being wasted in landfills, that the city pays for it, it could be recycled. And actually, with all the recycling, the city gets money. But we paid for all the disposal trash. So I really think that this needs to I mean, that the city could implement something in education of it. Like, people needs to know how much money is wasted and all those things that you don't take care of, put it in a different container. And make sure that you put it out on the street on the day that the recycling truck is going to pass by. So those things are I think that I mean, talking about environmental, I think is very important, especially being close to the ocean. That most of the time all those little cups and all that stuff that ends up in the ocean, and just, I'm not really, so how the city could face this thing.
Well, our recycling is, we're now picking up recycling every day, and at different parts of the city, and we have not made a lot of money in the past, but that is what we're starting to do now. We bought a baler to bale paper, and now we are making, I don't know where we are today, but like 3 months ago we were over $40,000. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's something because we weren't making anything before. There's definitely money to be made in recycling, and that's something that we really want to get, you know, off the ground more, because like I said, we're picking it up every day. And there was another thing I wanted to say about recycling.
Landfill space.
It
says landfill space.
Oh yeah, the landfill, we're almost at capacity. So our landfill is, we have to, this is not a new ordinance, it's always been in place, but it's getting ready to have to be, you know, enforced. But we can only take in, well, we'll have to start charging for taking in things from building, and I don't know how many years out that we are, but once that's done, we have to find another place or start paying a lot of money to have it shipped or taken at another location. So it's definitely in our very near future. So yes, it's very important to recycle.
So maybe last question, Leslie.
Thank you. So Karen, Mayor Karen, you mentioned earlier we received a $500,000 grant. When I was in New Orleans, the Lake Pontchartrain, if you guys are familiar with that, the lake was very, very polluted. Then they started a whole campaign and got the community behind it called Save Our Lake. There were bumper stickers everywhere. It was a huge marketing and PR campaign. I don't know what they did as far as treating the water, running things, what have you. But I know it took several years, but the lake went from being very polluted, like they would tell, do not swim in it, do not, like, you know, with our bay, to they turned it around. Now, it took time. I think it lasted several years, but I would highly recommend that you look at other cities, regions, what they did, especially Lake Pontchartrain, see what they did, and maybe take some best practices from other areas that
we'll
turned their
definitely look
lakes
into that.
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
we are in the rainiest city, and our watersheds, all of our gullies, one of the things we are going to be doing with Restore Act funds, or at least some of them, will be building models for all of our watersheds. And so we can, well, one of them we're already doing, I guess, in Tatumville, but we have to model these watersheds. That is where a lot of the wastewater is coming to, the stormwater runoff. And I know that there's other ways. I mean, obviously our goal is to get sewer far away from the bay. And I know that there's oyster beds that they're trying to do oyster farming, and there's definitely ways. We want to try to do all of it, because those are what the funds are for as well, the Restore Act funds. Right. The grants that she has, it's not just one grant. Right. Oh, yes. Actually, the Restore Act is, I mean, you've got all of these buckets, and municipalities have bucket 1 and 3, and 3 is really all about clean water. So we have like a month now, at mid-September, we're putting in our proposals for that. And it will all be all about the bay and our waterways, so.
We said that was the last one.
Okay. One more.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
We are working with them. They've already done a ton of work, yes. We have the book, yeah.
That's right.
We have the book, and we are going to put it online. It absolutely, and this gentleman right here, right here.
This is really the last one.
And we'll stay afterwards.
You said with the stormwater pollution, tremendously high amount of load of stormwater runoff. Do you consider that all of that is non-point source, or is there some kind of point source?
Well, it's considered a non-point source discharge, but our goal is to start looking at locations upstream of that collection point and where it may fork and come from two different directions, and look if there's a higher concentration in one fork of that discharge or not, and then work our way up. And you know, the issue that we want to make sure of is that our sewer system is sound in those locations. So we'll be doing some smoke testing and perhaps some video determinations of the condition of the line, and then work to solve any problems we find that way. One thing you mentioned in terms of Lake Pontchartrain and trying to solve problems quickly, perhaps, public awareness is a big part of all this. And what you find is that, and just recently, within 2 or 3 months ago, there was a sewer line coming from a building downtown that was connected to the storm drain. And you know, we found it accidentally because somebody putting in fiber hit one of our other infrastructure, part of the manhole, and just happened upon it. And so when you start looking at, you know, how come we're doing all this with our sewer system? Well, sometimes it's not as easy to diagnose and find problems without the support of the people that are out there that are living in it. I mean, clean outs in yards that get mowed over with a lawnmower, you know, the water starts pouring into those things. There's all kinds of places in residential locations, commercial locations, that allow inflow into the sewer system, and we can't be everywhere at one time, and somebody in the public needs to almost take a role in saying, hey, I think there's a problem right here. If you see a sinkhole in the ditch, a lot of times these people doing directional bores, putting in these other utilities, whether it be telephone or cable or anything else, it can be some of our utilities as well. And we hit a lateral, a sewer lateral serving a house. Well, after you know, a couple of 3 rain events, all of a sudden that ground is saturated and it's starting to pour into the lateral until there's basically a direct conduit, a sinkhole that goes straight to the sewer system, and all the water drains it. So those are the things that the public, and we do need to start putting together some public awareness literature and make people aware of what to look for and how to identify these problems so we can work on them.
Can we end with Maggie? Because we cannot end on that note. It's not a question. She just had a comment. Oh, he's been waiting,
yeah, he's been
patiently.
In the black hat, yeah.
And then Maggie, because
Hi.
we can't end on sinkholes.
Quail Creek Golf Course, owned and operated by the city of Fairhope. Half of the clubhouse is shut down due to a termite condition. Okay? Half of it's been shut down based on the termite condition, which would be the pro shop. What is the status, and when will we see action?
Oh, Lynn can help. Lynn is coordinating
It's
the project.
water damage. It wasn't termite. It was water damage, but she can give us an update.
Okay. There was water damage at all of the windows in the building. Unfortunately, because of the way it was constructed. We are at the point, we just had a meeting this week. We are at the point where we're going back to council on the 14th with a new scope of work, And there will be renovations done on the building, and we're hoping to get it started before October 1st, which is the end of our fiscal year. But that will be the beginning of the building. We will repair what we have to do now, and then we're looking to future plans of renovating the inside as time goes on and money permits. I'm watching you, Jay. Okay, does that answer your question?
Lynn, can
well, we know we have a gem there, and we know we need to do something with it, but we're going to have to do it in phases.
You got customers that are not going there anymore because of the conditions.
Well, it's been a while. It has been long, certainly longer than we wanted it to be. Right now, what we're taking to the new scope of work that we're going to be taking to council is going to include taking that cement patio out further, getting rid of the deck that exists that's fallen apart. We're going to take the cement patio out over that. There will be a roof overhead of that area. Then build a new deck off of that, which will be of a Trex type material. It'll hook up to the FIF scoreboard, so we'll have a nice smooth segue. We're taking the current ramp, which is not ADA compatible. We're going to move it to the west end of the building, so you can come from that side parking lot and come up and make that door that's right there ADA, the double door ADA, and then we're moving in, and you know where there's that go nowhere foyer, where you walk in near the current ramp, you walk in that door and you either go into the pro shop or you head into the dining area. We're going to remove that wall. It is not a support wall. We're going to open that up. So we are starting, this is the new scope of work we'll be taking to the council, looking for approval, and move forward with that. That's the beginning. The exterior of the building, all the stucco will go and will be replaced with hardy board, which is what's on the back of the building right now.
Are the windows hurricane-proof?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know. We are not replacing the windows. I know there's a certain amount of wind resistance there, but I don't know how much, and I couldn't begin to tell you. See? And we're going to have, in time, we're going to have a
We'll end with
clubhouse.
Maggie.
And then Maggie wanted to close.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you so much to Sherry Lee for going after that grant money. Yes.
It's a team effort.
I know it's a team effort, and thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Mayor Wilson. Thank you, Richard. I think you're all just amazing. I'm so proud to be a Fairhoper. I also want to say, this is a public service announcement, or what did you say we needed to raise public awareness? Raise public awareness about what is already in place. And that is a project that the City of Fairhope, the Marietta Johnson Museum, and the Organic School collaborated on in January, where beach cleanup receptacles were installed all along the bay from the duck pond all the way to the American Legion building. They were hand-painted by the students at the Organic School. They were installed by the wonderful people at the City of Fairhope. And to address the lady's question about recycling, it is to pick up plastic and put plastic like straws and cups and anything plastic, put in those little receptacles. You'll notice them along the bay because they're brightly painted and they're convenient. You pick up the plastic and let me start over. You put your hand in the receptacle and you pull out a bag and put the plastic in that, and then you put it in the garbage can that's right next to the receptacle for the bags. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm tired and I'm hungry.
Thank
you, and I know y'all are too. But please,
Maggie's excited
pick up
about
the plastic.
receptacles. Thank y'all for coming.